Hey friends, welcome to the Revenge by Frank. Please like, subscribe, and enjoy the new video.
They say weddings bring families together, but that day I started to feel like mine was pushing me out. My name is Robert Walsh. I'm 65 years old, retired from a 30-year career in structural engineering, and I live alone now in Dayton, Ohio. My wife, Julia, passed away 6 years ago. Since then, I've tried to be present for my kids, my grandkids, everyone. But that morning, as I stood in front of the mirror adjusting my tie, I realized how much I still missed her. I was wearing the gray suit she loved, the one she always said made me look dignified, not dusty. I stared at my reflection, brushed back a strand of white hair, and smiled at the memory of her saying it. "You'd better come with me in spirit today, Jules," I said aloud. "It's Jennifer's big day." Jennifer is my granddaughter, my oldest son, Richard's daughter. She was marrying a young man named Mark, someone I didn't know well but seemed nice enough. I had helped out with some of the wedding costs. Okay, more than helped. I'd footed most of the bill, but I didn't mind. Jennifer had always been sweet to me growing up. I figured this was just what grandfathers did. The ceremony was held at a vineyard outside Cincinnati, and it was beautiful. White chairs, soft music, sunshine through the trees. It felt like one of those movie weddings. I teared up watching Richard walk Jennifer down the aisle. He looked proud, she looked radiant, and for a moment, I felt a sense of peace. That feeling didn't last. At the reception, there was a table with name cards. Guests lined up to find theirs, laughing and chatting. I spotted mine tucked near the end and reached for it. My hand stopped midair. Instead of Robert Walsh or Grandpa, my card read, "The old man who'll pay for everything, my guy." I blinked. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe someone printed a placeholder joke that wasn't meant to go out. I looked around. No one else seemed to notice. I quietly picked up the card and slipped it into my jacket pocket. Later, after the first round of toasts, I pulled Richard aside near the bar. "Hey," I said, showing him the card. "What is this supposed to mean?" He chuckled and clapped me on the back. "Oh, come on, Dad. It's just a joke. Lighten up." "A joke?" I asked, not laughing. "Do you think this is funny?" He shrugged. "It's just something the kids thought would get a laugh. No harm." "No harm?" My stomach twisted. I thought of Julia, of how she would have been horrified. I excused myself and walked outside for some air. That card burned in my pocket like a secret no one cared to keep. "A joke," he said. But all I felt was humiliation. For the first time in a long while, I wondered if my family really saw me at all, or if they just saw my wallet. The morning after the wedding, I was still thinking about that damn name card. I had left the reception early, told everyone I was tired. The truth was, I didn't trust myself to stay without saying something I'd regret. I laid in bed that night, with the suit jacket still hanging from the closet door, the card still tucked inside its pocket. I couldn't bring myself to throw it away. The next day, the family gathered at the lodge for brunch, some kind of farewell meal before people headed back to their hotels or caught flights. I considered skipping it, but I'd promised Jennifer I'd be there. The place was buzzing with chatter. Everyone was hungover but cheerful, digging into bacon and pancakes, raising mimosas. I kept to myself at the end of the table, nursing a cup of black coffee. That's when I heard it. "I swear," Pamela said, laughing, "your dad should start charging interest. The man's basically our family bank." She didn't know I was behind her. She was talking to Richard and Jennifer's new husband, Mark. Her voice had that tone, half joke, half truth, all casual entitlement. Richard chimed in. "Seriously though, without Dad, that wedding wouldn't have happened. Guy practically financed the whole thing." "Hey, let's not forget the honeymoon," Pamela added, swirling the last of her orange juice. "He said he wanted to give Jennifer something special. So generous." I froze. I had said no such thing about the honeymoon. They kept talking, quieter now. I only caught fragments. Might as well move into his house, cut down on our mortgage. Retirement home's not a bad idea. More manageable for him anyway. Something in me shifted. I stood slowly, set my mug down, and walked away without saying a word. I found Richard near the coffee station later, checking his phone. "I heard you and Pamela talking," I said calmly. About me. About the house. The honeymoon. He didn't look up. Dad, you're taking it too seriously. Did I ever say I'd pay for their honeymoon? He finally looked at me, flashing that easy grin he used when he wanted to deflect. Come on, it's not a big deal. You've always helped out. They're family. You're just being sensitive. Sensitive, I repeated. He sipped his coffee like it was just another Sunday. They think I'm just a wallet to be passed around, I said. Richard rolled his eyes. It's not like that. You're reading into it too much. You always do this? I turned to leave, but then someone called my name. Robert, a familiar voice said. It was Martin Reynolds, our family lawyer for more than 2 decades. He was standing near the hallway, arms folded, watching me with a strange expression. You got a second? We walked down to the quiet end of the hallway, away from the noise. Martin looked around, then leaned in slightly. I've been meaning to talk to you. Something Julia had me put in her will before she passed. I felt a pinch in my chest at the sound of her name. What about it? She added a clause, Martin said. One you probably don't remember. Or maybe she never mentioned it. I frowned. What kind of clause? He pulled out his phone and scrolled through a file. She wanted to make sure you'd be protected from this kind of thing. What kind of thing? I asked. Exploitation. Disrespect. Public humiliation, he said, glancing up. She wrote it in clear language. If any beneficiary publicly mocks you, humiliates you, or treats you in a way that undermines your dignity, they forfeit their inheritance. I stared at him, stunned. She really put that in writing? Martin nodded. She was worried, Robert. Even back then. Said she'd seen the way Richard and Pamela were treating you after she got sick. My stomach churned. A mix of sadness, guilt, and something else. Something closer to vindication. She told me, he won't stand up for himself, but I will. I looked away, jaw tight. Julia had always seen right through people, even our son. Martin handed me a printout of the clause. It's still active. If you want to enforce it, let me know. But just knowing it's there might give you some peace of mind. I stared at the paper, the words clear as day. Something inside me started to steady. Maybe I wasn't crazy. Maybe I wasn't just being sensitive. Maybe I'd been right to feel the way I did. My wife had known, long before I did, and now I had a choice to make. I spent the next week in a fog. I'd wake up, make coffee, sit in the kitchen staring out the window and just think. I couldn't stop replaying that brunch, those words, our family bank. Might as well move into his house, like I was already a piece of furniture they were planning to rearrange. And then there was the will, Julia's clause. A quiet shield she'd built years ago, already knowing what I couldn't admit. Our son had started seeing me less like a father, and more like a bottomless checkbook. That realization stung worse than I expected. I pulled out a yellow legal pad one morning and started writing things down. Not feelings, facts, numbers, dates, loans. There was the $15,000 for the kitchen remodel, which somehow turned into a new home theater. The $25,000 to help cover unexpected moving costs, though they never moved. $8,000 for a new car when Pamela's SUV mysteriously died. And of course, the wedding, close to $60,000, all in. Dresses, venue, flowers, bar tab, band. They'd told me they'd pay me back as soon as things settled, but I never saw a dime. By the time I was done, the total sat around $250,000. In 5 years. All gone. And I had the bank statements to prove it. The worst part? I hadn't said no once. I wanted to be generous. I wanted to feel needed. And maybe deep down, I thought giving meant they loved me. That night, Pamela called. Her voice was chipper. Robert, just wanted to thank you again for everything. The wedding was just, oh my gosh, magical. Jennifer's still over the moon. I'm glad she had a good time, I said. And that honeymoon. I mean, she didn't stop posting for a week. That resort you helped with? Stunning. I didn't correct her. I hadn't agreed to pay for the honeymoon, but apparently it was easier for everyone to just assume I had. "Oh," she added. "And Richard and I were actually thinking of redoing the backyard. You know, patio, hot tub, the whole thing. We'll send you the plans once we finalize." There it was, the next request, barely a week after the wedding. "I'll have to think about that," I said, my tone flat. Pamela paused. "Oh, of course, no rush. Just wanted to put it on your radar." After we hung up, I sat on the edge of my bed and just stared at the floor. I felt tired, but not defeated. Something had changed. I wasn't panicking. I wasn't making excuses. I was just quiet. And that quiet, it felt good. I knew I wasn't ready to confront them. Not yet. Not while my emotions were still raw. I needed time. To observe. To wait. To think. Let them keep showing me who they were. The next few weeks I didn't bring up the name tag. I didn't bring up the clause. I didn't bring up the plans for my backyard. Instead, I started watching, paying attention. Jennifer posted a video on Instagram of their honeymoon suite, tagging "Thanks Grandpa" with champagne emojis. Richard uploaded a picture of himself in the hot tub at the hotel, wearing sunglasses I bought him 2 birthdays ago. Pamela posted about her dream of creating a peaceful Zen garden at home, and tagged a landscaping company. They weren't subtle. They never had been. They just assumed I'd never say no. But what they didn't know, what they'd never considered, was that I could say no. I had just never tried. That weekend, I walked into the garage and dusted off an old wooden easel. It had been years since I painted. Julia used to beg me to pick it back up after retirement, but I never had the time. Now I did. I set the easel up by the window, cracked open a fresh canvas, and started with a small landscape. Nothing fancy. Just trees, a little creek, maybe some sky. But it felt like the first thing I'd done for myself in a long, long time. This was no longer about punishing them. This was about reclaiming space. Julia had seen this coming. I didn't, but I saw it now. And I wasn't going to react. Not yet. I was going to wait. Let them talk. Let them plan. Let them ask. Because eventually they'd go too far. And when they did, I'd be ready. It was the first Saturday of April when Michael showed up at my door. No warning. Just a knock and his face in the window pane. Nervous, like he wasn't sure if I'd even open the door. I hadn't seen him much since the wedding. He'd been quiet during all the festivities, mostly hanging back, avoiding the spotlight. But now he stood on my porch holding a brown paper bag from the local bakery. "Brought cinnamon rolls," he said as I opened the door. "Figured you still liked them." I nodded and stepped aside. Michael had always been different. Thoughtful, reserved, a quiet kid who watched more than he spoke. When he was younger, he used to follow Julia around the garden with a notebook, asking about every flower. She adored him for that. We sat in the kitchen, the rolls untouched between us. He tapped his fingers against the mug of tea I'd poured him, eyes darting everywhere but at me. "I owe you an apology," he said finally. I raised an eyebrow. "For what?" "For not saying anything at the wedding, about the name tag, about how they've been treating you." I sat back in my chair. "You saw it?" "I did," he said, his voice low. "I thought it was a joke at first. Then I saw your face." I didn't reply right away. I just let the silence settle between us. "I should have said something," he continued, "but I didn't want to start a scene." "You're not the one who needs to apologize, Michael." He looked up, eyes glassy. "Still, I should have had your back." I shook my head. "You're here now. That means more than you think." He nodded and took a sip of tea. Then, almost too casually, he said, "I heard something the other day. Thought you should know." My stomach tightened. "What was it?" "I was at Mom and Dad's last week. They didn't know I was still in the hallway. They were in the kitchen, talking about your house." I didn't speak. I just waited. They said you're probably getting too old to live alone, that it might be time to suggest you move into one of those retirement communities. Said it'd free up the house for something more useful. I stared at him. Michael kept going. Mom even said the upstairs could be renovated. You know, open up the floor plan. Like your life's just a blueprint to redesign. I felt the heat rise in my chest, but I didn't show it. I'd spent too long being the calm one. That habit didn't die easily. They don't know I heard, he said, but I couldn't pretend I didn't. I looked out the window, the same window Julia used to sit by, reading or folding laundry, humming to herself while I mowed the lawn. This house was filled with her. And now, my own son and his wife were plotting to empty it. They've crossed a line, I said finally. Michael looked down at the table. I know. But what he didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I wasn't angry anymore. I was done feeling hurt. I was done being confused. I was just clear. Thank you for telling me, I said. He nodded, silent. I'm not leaving this house, I added. And I'm not going to be pushed around anymore. But I'm not going to yell. I'm not going to throw a fit. I'm going to wait. Michael looked confused. Wait for what? For them to give me the perfect moment. He studied me for a second, then smiled, just a little. You're planning something, aren't you? I smiled back. Let's just say I'm not as easy to move as they think. He laughed, the first real laugh since he walked in. Then he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small envelope. What's this? I asked. Plans for a bookstore, he said. My own. I've been saving, but it's a slow climb. I opened the envelope and saw a sketch of a small shop, handwritten notes, cost breakdowns. It was rough, but it was real. Looks like you've been planning something too, I said. I don't want to end up like them, he replied. Taking, expecting. I want to build something of my own. I looked at him, at this young man Julia would have been proud of, and I thought, maybe there's still something worth investing in. Not them, but him. I didn't want to go to the brunch. Every part of me told me to stay home. But I had learned something in the last few weeks. Silence can be just as powerful as any speech, and sometimes you have to show up just to remind people that you're still standing. The post-wedding brunch was held at some overpriced restaurant in downtown Cincinnati, a rooftop place with string lights and overpriced mimosas. Pamela had sent me a formal text inviting me, like I was a distant uncle and not the man who paid for her daughter's wedding. I wore the same gray suit, the one Julia loved. Let them see I was still the same man, dignified, quiet, not easily rattled. The table was long, stretching almost the full length of the patio. Jennifer and Mark sat at one end, smiling like two catalog models. Richard and Pamela flanked them like royalty. I took a seat near the other end, unnoticed. The server poured my coffee. I didn't touch it. I watched instead. Halfway through the meal, Richard stood and tapped his glass with a butter knife. Before we all head back to our lives, he began, I just want to take a moment to thank the person who made all this possible. I knew where this was going. I kept my eyes on my napkin. My dad, he said, gesturing toward me with an exaggerated smile. Thank you, Dad, for paying for the wedding, for being our family's rock, for always stepping up. People clapped politely. A few chuckled. Someone muttered, must be nice, and I felt a dozen eyes on me, waiting for me to nod, smile, say something. I didn't move. Pamela stood next. And let's not forget, she said with her champagne flute raised, he also generously funded Jennifer and Mark's honeymoon. We are just so blessed. There it was again. That word, generously, as if I had thrown money at them from a balcony out of love, not expectation. I cleared my throat and stood. The clinking stopped. The chatter froze. Even Jennifer turned in her seat. I didn't pay for the honeymoon, I said. Silence. Pamela let out a small, awkward laugh. Oh, Robert, I just assumed. No, you didn't assume. You decided. Just like you decided I'd cover the flowers. And the band. And the custom dance floor with the monogrammed initials. My voice was steady, calm. Years of holding back had trained me well. You've mistaken my kindness for obligation. Again and again. Richard shifted in his seat. Dad, can we not do this here? I think here is exactly where it should happen, I said. You thanked me, but you didn't ask. You never ask. You just send the bills and expect me to smile while writing the check. Come on, he said, forcing a chuckle. We're family. Exactly, I said. And family means respect. It means honesty. It doesn't mean handing me a name tag that says I'm the old man who pays for everything. A few people gasped. Jennifer's face dropped. Pamela spoke up, trying to save the moment. Robert, it was a joke. You're taking it too seriously. I looked right at her. You've been taking me for granted. I turned to Jennifer and Mark. I love you both. I truly do. But I never offered to pay for your honeymoon. And I won't. Jennifer opened her mouth, then closed it again. I looked down the long table, scanning every face. I'm done being treated like a wallet. I'm done being laughed at behind my back. I'm done funding people who don't think I deserve a seat at the table unless I'm footing the bill. No one said a word. Even the server froze at the edge of the patio, unsure if he should keep pouring coffee. I'll still be at the important moments, I said. The ones that come from the heart, not from a budget. But from now on, my money is mine. I sat back down, folded my napkin. The silence lingered like fog. Awkward, dense. Richard tried to recover with a mumbled, "Let's just enjoy the food." But no one touched their plates. I sipped my coffee finally. It was lukewarm, bitter, but it tasted like freedom. A few days after the brunch, I asked Martin Reynolds to come by the house. I told him we'd talk over coffee, just two old men catching up. But we both knew why he was really there. We sat in the sunroom Julia used to love, the late afternoon light slanting across the tile floor. I had made a fresh pot of coffee and laid out lemon cookies, the ones Julia always said were too tart, but honest. Martin took a sip, nodded approvingly, then pulled a folder from his briefcase. "You're sure you want to go over this now?" he asked. I nodded. "It's time." He opened the folder and slid out a copy of Julia's will. The paper looked almost too crisp, too clean, like the ink hadn't fully settled even after all these years. Martin cleared his throat. Julia worked with me in secret during her last 6 months. She was deliberate, sharp, clear about what she wanted. I swallowed hard but didn't interrupt. She asked me to include several clauses. Protections, really. Some were financial. Some were emotional. Emotional? I asked. She was worried about how you'd be treated after she was gone, he said. Worried you wouldn't push back. I looked away, out the window, watching the wind shift through the tall grass in the backyard. That sounded exactly like her. She created a provision that gives you full authority to amend, freeze, or redistribute any inheritance if you feel you're being used or disrespected. Martin continued. In simple terms, you hold all the strings. I turned back to him. And the clause about public humiliation? He nodded. Still there, still valid. If a beneficiary humiliates you or diminishes your dignity, they can be removed from the will. With no appeal. I leaned back in my chair, feeling the weight of that sentence. She knew, I said quietly. She saw it all coming. Martin gave a small smile. She didn't like what she saw, Robert, but she knew you'd need backup. She said, and I quote, "He'll never raise his voice, so I'm giving him a louder pen." That got me. I looked down at the folder, blinking away the heat behind my eyes. I didn't want it to be like this, I said. I just wanted to help them, to be close. I know. Martin slid the folder closer. You don't have to act on anything right now, but if you choose to enforce the clause, I'll handle it. Quietly. I nodded slowly. Thank you, but no, not yet. His brow furrowed. You're sure? I want them to keep talking, I said, to keep assuming. I want them to show me who they are without knowing there's a line they're already crossing." He smiled again, this time more fully. Julia would have liked that. We sat for a while in silence, sipping our coffee, listening to the rustling leaves outside. For the first time in months, maybe longer, I didn't feel uncertain. I felt grounded. Julia had seen the whole picture. I'd been squinting at it, trying to pretend parts of it didn't exist. But now, the frame was clear. This house, this life, what's left of it, is mine. And if the people in it don't know how to act with grace, I don't need to shout. I don't need to make a scene. All I need to do is wait. Because the will speaks for itself, and eventually they'll hear it loud and clear. I never liked throwing myself a birthday party. But this year, for my 66th, I sent out invitations anyway. Just family, no friends, no neighbors. I kept it simple. A backyard cookout, burgers on the grill, lemonade in a big glass pitcher, folding chairs around the fire pit. I wasn't trying to make it special. I was trying to make it honest. Everyone showed up, of course. They always did when food was free. Richard brought a store-bought cake with "Happy B-Day Dad" scrawled across the top in red icing. Pamela hovered around the grill, making comments about the heat. Jennifer and Mark arrived late, looking uncomfortable. Michael was already there, helping me set out plates. I watched them all, one by one, laughing, eating, sipping drinks like nothing had changed. But I had. After we all ate, I clinked my glass and stood up. "Appreciate everyone coming out," I said. 66 feels a little heavier than 65. Thought it was time to have everyone under one roof. Jennifer smiled and nodded. Pamela raised her cup. Richard leaned back in his chair like he was expecting a toast. Instead, I looked straight at him. "I've been thinking a lot about family lately. About respect, boundaries, gratitude." He shifted. "Uh-oh," he muttered, trying to make a joke out of it. "I've realized something," I continued. "For years, I've tried to support this family, emotionally, financially, in every way I knew how, and I thought that was enough. But lately, I've come to see that helping and being used are two very different things." Pamela rolled her eyes. "Robert, what is this about?" "I'm not selling my house," I said, turning to Richard, "and I'm not moving anywhere, so you can stop making plans for renovations that were never yours to begin with." Richard sat up straighter. "No one's making plans. You talked about it at brunch, about converting the upstairs, about downsizing me out of my own home." Pamela's face flushed. "We were just talking in hypotheticals." "No," I said. "You weren't. You were counting on me being quiet. Again." I reached into my back pocket and pulled out a sealed envelope. "This is a statement of intent. I'm keeping full control of my finances, my property, and my estate. And I'm adjusting the will." Richard frowned. "What do you mean, adjusting?" I didn't answer. Martin Reynolds did. He stood up from the far end of the table where he had been sitting quietly until now, blending in like just another guest. He smoothed his jacket and stepped beside me. "For those of you who don't know me, I'm Robert's attorney. I've also been the legal counsel for this family for over 25 years. Pamela narrowed her eyes. "Why is he here?" "To clarify a few things," Martin said calmly. "Julia Walsh, Robert's late wife, left behind a will, one that contains a very specific clause." He pulled out a copy, folded neatly in a plastic sleeve. "This clause grants Robert sole discretion to remove any beneficiary who disrespects, manipulates, or publicly humiliates him. And recent events, unfortunately, fall into that category." Richard stood up, voice rising. "You've got to be kidding me. You're threatening us with Mom's will?" "No threat," I said. "Just truth." Pamela looked at Martin. "You can't just change the will because someone's feelings got hurt." Martin stayed calm. "Actually, under Ohio law, this clause is valid, and your actions, particularly the name tag incident, the assumptions about financial obligations, And the plans regarding Robert's home are all documented. All of it qualifies. Jennifer looked like she wanted to disappear. Mark stared at his shoes. Richard's voice dropped, low and sharp. So what? You're cutting us off? No, I said. You cut yourselves off. I'm just enforcing what Julia already knew would be necessary. Michael, seated beside me, finally spoke up. Maybe now you'll listen. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was thick, final. Pamela opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Richard looked at me like he was seeing someone else, someone he didn't recognize, someone he couldn't control. I'm not angry, I said, but I am done. I turned and walked back to the house, Martin beside me. Behind me, no one clapped, no one cheered, but I had never felt more celebrated. The next morning I sat on the back porch with a fresh cup of coffee, watching the sun rise over my lawn. The grass was long in spots and the flower beds were a mess. Julia would have hated that, but it was mine, all of it. And for the first time in a long while, I felt like I could breathe. The confrontation had settled something inside me. Not anger, not revenge, just closure. I had drawn the line, and for once no one dared to step over it. Michael came by that afternoon, knocking on the door with a cautious smile and 2 bags of Chinese takeout. Figured you could use a lazy lunch, he said, holding the bags up. I let him in, and we ate at the kitchen table. Same as always. No tension, no weight in the air. How are you feeling? He asked between bites of lo mein. Free, I said. Which is strange because nothing's changed. Not really. Michael nodded. Actually, I think everything's changed. He was right. I hadn't spoken to Richard or Pamela since the party. Jennifer had sent a short message, just 3 words. I'm so sorry. Mark didn't say anything, but I noticed he removed the honeymoon photos from his social media. Maybe that was his way of acknowledging something. But none of that mattered much anymore. What mattered was what I chose to do next. After lunch, I asked Michael if we could take a short drive. He looked confused, but said sure. We got in my truck and drove 10 minutes into town, stopping in front of a little storefront tucked between a bakery and an antique shop. This is it? I asked. Michael looked out the window and nodded. Yeah, it's small, but it has good foot traffic. And the rent's decent. I stepped out and followed him to the window. There was a dusty "For Lease" sign taped to the glass, and inside, empty shelves lined the walls. You've got the plan, I said. Michael glanced at me. I do. You've got the passion, he smiled. Definitely. And now, I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a folded check. You've got the backing. He took the check and opened it slowly. When he saw the number, his eyes widened. Grandpa, this is too much. No, it's not, I said. It's just right. You're building something. That's where my money's going now. He stood there for a moment, speechless. Then he hugged me, tight, like he hadn't done since he was a little boy. I felt Julia in that hug. You believe in me? He asked quietly. I always have. The next few weeks were full of motion. Michael signed the lease. We painted the walls, cleaned out the old fixtures, ordered shelves, and designed a little reading nook by the front window. He called it Walsh and Words. Said he wanted to honor the name, make it mean something good. People started stopping by to peek in. We put up a sign, opening soon. Michael was there every day, making calls, organizing inventory, running spreadsheets. I came by most afternoons just to sit in the back and paint, small canvases this time. Little scenes of the neighborhood, the shop, even a portrait of Julia from memory. One afternoon, Jennifer stopped by. She stood awkwardly in the doorway, holding a stack of books. Donation, she said, for the store. Michael took them and smiled. Thanks. She turned to me. Can I talk to you for a second? We stepped outside. She looked nervous, unsure. I didn't see it, she said. What they were doing, what I was doing. I didn't say anything, but I do now, and I'm sorry, really sorry. I studied her face. She looked different, older, wiser, humbled. I appreciate that, I said, but I don't need words anymore. I need change. She nodded. You'll get it, I promise. Back inside, Michael had started organizing a table of local authors. He smiled when he saw me return. You okay? He asked. I nodded. This was what legacy looked like. Not houses or inheritance, but lessons passed on, boundaries, dignity, kindness without strings attached. I wasn't just funding a bookstore. I was building something real. 1 year later, I walked through the doors of Walsh & Words and stopped just inside, letting the sound wash over me, pages flipping, quiet voices, the bell above the door chiming behind me. The place had life now. It smelled like books and coffee and fresh paint. A mural stretched along the back wall, one I had painted over the winter. It showed a winding path through a forest of stories, trees with titles on their trunks, branches filled with swirling phrases. Michael insisted we sign it together in the bottom right corner. Grandpa, he called from behind the register, you're just in time. We're getting slammed this afternoon. He said it like it was the best problem in the world. I walked over and leaned against the counter. I thought I'd swing by with a few more framed prints. That little girl yesterday liked the one with the yellow trees. Michael smiled. She made her mom buy it, said it looked like a dream. I set the new prints down gently. Well, dreams need encouragement. He looked at me for a moment, his expression quiet. You know this wouldn't exist without you, right? I shook my head. It exists because you showed up. I just opened a door. We stood in comfortable silence for a few seconds. Then Michael looked toward the front windows. You see who just walked in? I turned. Jennifer, holding hands with Mark, a little tighter now. Her expression was softer than it used to be, lighter. She saw me and waved gently, then walked to the back where the new releases were. She comes in a lot now, Michael said. Always buys something. Good, I said. That's good. And it was. Not perfect, not dramatic, just better. She never asked for money, never brought up the will. Sometimes change doesn't come in apologies, it comes in quiet adjustments. I sat down near the mural, letting the sunlight fall across the floor in long gold streaks. Julia would have liked this place. She would have loved the little reading corner by the window, the warm lamplight over the register, the way Michael ran the shop with kindness instead of ego. I thought about that clause in her will, the one that gave me back my dignity, and realized something. The greatest thing she gave me wasn't the legal protection, it was the reminder that I mattered, that I was worth defending. Now, as I watched customers wander through the store, flipping pages and smiling, I felt something deeper than pride. I felt peace. Because in the end, my legacy won't be the money I gave. It'll be the boundaries I kept, the people I lifted, and the life I chose to live for myself.
YouTube picked this for you. Tap it. Let's see if they guessed right.